Welcome to this podcast based on Human Capital Institute's Corporate Social Networking and Your Employer Brand, a recession-proof match webcast, sponsored by JWT Inside. This event was presented by Jeannie C. Meisler, founder of New Learning Playbook, and Shelley Reese, Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy and Planning for JWT Inside. The number of organizations that recognize how learning is becoming a social and a personal experience is growing. In organizations, learning is becoming untraditional. It's growing way beyond intranets and university programs. There is a real need now to incorporate subject matter expertise that you find on social media networks into learning programs. Shelley is going to start us off by defining social media and sharing common fears and myths. Have a listen.
Well, the reason social media is so relevant to the field of corporate learning is because social media is just online interaction. It's just an online reflection of the interactions that we participate in on a daily basis. It's about engaging in authentic conversations. And if you look at the list of things there that it's also about commenting, sharing, promoting, collaborating, discussing, learning from others, influencing others, you can see that it's almost a direct reflection of everything that is important about learning and development within your organization. Social media isn't just about selling information, it's about how you communicate that to people. And it's not just about technology, it's not just about using the internet to start communicating your learning and development programs to your employees. It's about how you're telling stories to each other. Now, one of the obstacles to social networking, whether this is externally or internally, whether this is to do with recruitment, whether it's to do with retention, it's subject to a huge amount of fears and a huge amount of myths. And this is the same when it comes to social networking within corporate learning, corporate enterprise learning. There are a lot of concerns about whether or not you should be allowing your employees to take part in external social networks. And as we mentioned earlier, it's interesting the balance between setting up your own corporate social networks internally, which can prove to be a little bit expensive, it can prove time-consuming, or whether or not you just tell your employees, go out there, go out and involve and include yourselves in the social networking that's already happening out there. So some of the fears and myths are represented here. There's a fear of transparency and a loss of control. How can you be certain what people are saying out there? How can you be certain that your employees are articulating your brand effectively out there? And how can you control what they say? Should you control what they say? The concerns about giving content away for free. If you prefer to run your corporate learning through external social networks, does that not mean that your employees are going to be giving away intellectual capital in the external marketplace? Another obstacle to asking your employees to join external social networks is, we have too many serious marketing and branding messages to play around. Social networking is often seen as trivial by a lot of people within organizations. It's also seen as a distraction for employees and members to participate in social media. Yes, they may well be learning valuable information from people within their industry, but is it not a distraction? There are some other fears and myths relating to setting up internal corporate social networks. There are concerns about the expense. It is very expensive just to set up, or can be very expensive just to set up your own internal corporate social network when everything else is out there for free if you want to access it. There are concerns that it's not real marketing. There are also some concerns about IT. If you're setting up an internal corporate social network, you usually have to do it through your IT department, and social media, it's fair to say, is probably not high on your IT team's list of priorities. And the final concern that a lot of people have is they must have a strategic approach before starting. We have to have sat down. We have to thought this entire thing through for months and months before we start approaching it. But that's not the case either, because corporate learning and corporate enterprise learning already exists within most of your organizations. It's a matter of looking inside your existing learning and development teams and trying to leverage the content that already is there.
Now that Shelley has given us an overview, Jeannie is going to take over and really dig into why it's so important to use social media.
Social networks are becoming ubiquitous. I actually update this chart every month, and it's it's almost laughable, right? But you can see just how ubiquitous, and you can sort of check against yourself and say, you know, am I on these networks? And also ask yourself, as I would, are you using them to further your business goals? So it's not just being on the networks with friends and family, but how are you using the network to improve your career goals, to improve how you do your job at work, and to expand your personal brand. So this is another piece of research that we thought was very interesting. It was for those of us on the webcast that are members of the American Society for Training and Development. This is a survey that was conducted last year called Web 2.0, Dawn of a New Era in Corporate Learning. And it was a sample of 743 respondents that said, basically, are you using some type of Web 2.0 or social media today? And what do you think you're going to be doing differently in the next 3 years? And you can see the overwhelming amount of people, almost 9 out of 10 respondents are saying within 3 years it's likely that they'll be integrating some type of social media inside the learning function. The next two charts also go along with this research study. It's a list of responses, and the question was, which should be on the top but is not, is what are the major benefits or opportunities does this sample of 700 plus see in using social media inside the organization? And if you look at this chart, the top, say, 6 or 7 responses versus the bottom 3 is really a very different type of person. The top responses are all sort of learning and development. I want to improve knowledge sharing and foster more learning in the organization and boost collaboration. But it's really the bottom 3 that are, for me, the more important business drivers. This is what a senior executive is going to be interested in. You know, are we able to use social media inside the company to solve problems faster and more efficiently? Are we able to build relationships inside the organization so we increase the cycle time of how we innovate with new products and services? Are we able to increase our number of patents maybe on innovation and creativity? So it's really sort of the business drivers at the bottom. So how will learning in HR as professions sort of transform over the next couple of years? Well, I like to think of it as, I think they're going to be focused a lot on what I think of as the 5 C's. How can they add more collaboration to what they're doing? How can they add more crowdsourcing? For those of you in the recruiting function, there was a very interesting article about Best Buy recently, which had a new job opening for a senior manager in emerging social medias. And what they did was they first wrote up the job spec, but then the manager said, why don't we crowdsource this? Why don't we put it on Best Buy IdeaX, which is their external social media site, and see what other folks say. What should be important in this new job of social manager of emerging social media? Well, if you want to learn more about it, I can talk to you offline. But one of the big ahas was one of the requirements as developed by in the crowd was you should have at least 250 followers on Twitter, meaning you should be an active student and learner on some of these social medias, and you should be actively involved on the rest of them, LinkedIn and Facebook. So it was a very interesting case study. So the next C, actually creating more communities by job titles, making sure everyone is connected, and then developing some strategy for incorporating more user-generated content into learning programs.